So Patrick's a co-founder of Alaris. Alaris is there to fill the gaps in providing data to which is normally provided by credit bureaus. Patrick has overseen the development and distribution of the Alaris platform since its inception in 2017. Prior to Alaris, Patrick spent 15 years developing and commercialising various products in the software, data and technology space. During this time, Patrick's gained extensive experience working within startups as well as ASX 300 listed companies and multinational corporations. Patrick holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Stanford University in California, USA, which is interesting in itself. Before we get started, just if you've got questions, we'll take them at the end. You'll see at the bottom of your screen there is a chat function which you're welcome to use to ask questions as we go through, but we will actually have a question time right at the end of the session. For those that have joined us before, you'll know that these are short, sharp sessions. We're normally in and out within about half an hour or so, depending on the number of questions that are raised at the end. So welcome, Patrick. Thank you very much for taking the time to actually talk to our network today. Tell us a little bit about Alaris, what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. And look, thank you very much as well for having me on. Really appreciate it. Look, the best way to explain what Alaris does is to show a couple of quick examples. So hopefully you can all see my screen share there. And look, I think we can all agree that court action, legal actions, litigation is a key indicator of financial stress. And it's also a critical input into managing your risk, whether that's credit related or reputational. What a lot of people perhaps don't appreciate is that the majority of court actions are actually not captured within existing credit reports. And that seems to be a common misperception that we encounter quite often, is that people believe that in a lot of ways credit reports are all encompassing, when in fact, as far as court action goes, most matters are actually not included. We built the Alaris platform specifically to fill that gap in credit report data. So we don't necessarily replicate what the credit bureaus do. They already do a fine job. We exist to fill this specific gap. And I'll just give a couple of examples. So here's a particular company, and we're not sort of trying to name or shame anybody, so we've grayed out the names here. What you can see in our report is basically a bunch of different court actions in various courts around the country. And you can see the types of matters here: breach of contract, corporations matters, small claims, and so on. So clearly, just looking at some summary detail there, you can see that these matters are relevant to credit. If you look, however, at the credit report on this entity run at the same time, you'll see that the credit report's telling you there are no court actions at all. Okay, and so again, this is the specific gap that we fill, where the credit reports will provide some information, but certainly not all of it. And we come along and we provide the difference. Just another one here, so very similar. You can see that this particular company, that they've applied to set aside a stat demand in the federal court. They've also had some more recent employment-related issues, potential negligence cases here. So, you know, that these could be quite meaningful matters. And again, if you look at the credit report, same entity, same time, that doesn't show any of these matters. So the whole point of showing this is simply to say that, look, if you're a credit manager or you're otherwise required to manage risk within your business, if you've only got access to the right-hand side of the screen here with the credit report data, you may well form a view based on the information that you see here. Whereas if you also include our information, you may well form a very different view about the potential risk and whether or not you want to extend credit and on what terms. So again, we exist to fill in that gap. And just to summarize what the difference is basically credit reports, by and large, as far as court information is concerned, they provide judgments for monetary claims. Okay, so if there's a monetary claim that results in a judgment, that'll end up on a credit report. What's not included, though, are all of the monetary judgments that don't, all of the monetary claims that don't result in a judgment, and they are substantial in number. And then there's a whole bunch of other types of court matters that, by their nature, don't result necessarily in a monetary judgment, but could be just as critical to managing your risk that will just never appear on a credit report at all. So we capture all those matters. The one at the bottom in itself is quite interesting. So we also capture matters where the entity of interest is the plaintiff. And we see a lot of instances where a company, through no fault of its own, can end up in strife simply because it didn't get paid itself. So it may have filed a claim in court seeking payment, and subject to the outcome of that, they may end up becoming collateral damage just simply because they themselves didn't get paid. So those plaintiff matters can also be quite indicative of potential issues.
It's interesting because last week I got appointed actually to a construction company, and Patrick was good enough to actually send me through an Alaris report on that particular entity, which showed many different actions that actually have been taken against this particular company, which we've then been able to use to actually try and get that information from the courts to assist in the investigations that we're currently conducting. So it was very useful, the sort of information that probably we wouldn't have got elsewhere. So yes, it's a very good report.
Welcome.
Thank you. So anyway, tell us a little bit from your perspective, and you see a lot of what's going on really at the coalface. What's been happening with insolvencies over the last 2 years of the pandemic?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, Steve. And look, there's no doubt that in the last 2 years, across the board, insolvencies have been down. And that can be attributed to any number of different factors, as we likely all know. There's been stimulus, there's been moratoriums on pursuing debts, in particular by the ATO. So there's been a lot of sort of tailwinds that have helped people stay afloat, where perhaps in more normal times they would not have benefited from that help. So the numbers across the board have been down in the past couple of years. There was some evidence towards the end of last year that the numbers were starting to creep up again. And then, of course, we hit the Christmas period, December, January, where historically numbers are quite low in any event, just based on the holiday season. So it's always a bit hard in the December and January numbers to sort of read too much into which way the trend is heading. But I think the February numbers will start to be telling again, and then certainly heading into March.
So I got an email from you, I think, I can't remember, it was within the last couple of months anyway, and the email made comment about the banks starting to take a fair amount of action. So, I mean, being an insolvency practitioner, I probably haven't seen a lot of that ourselves in terms of wind-ups and those sort of things. But when we're talking about the banks taking action, what are we really talking about there? Ah, here we go.
Yeah, so look, here's a slide that I think paints a pretty clear picture of it. So you can see here through 2019, pre-pandemic, the numbers were consistently fairly high. So this is looking at all court actions filed by the big four banks specifically. And you can see that they remained fairly active right up until March, when sort of the first round of lockdowns and repayment concessions kicked in, and then it effectively dropped, close to zero. They're probably still sort of chasing just a couple of really bad apples, but by and large, they pretty much stopped altogether. And what we see is sort of second quarter last year, they kicked into gear again. There was a bit of a lull here around September where there was some of the renewed sort of ongoing lockdowns, particularly in Victoria and Sydney. And then it sort of picked up again and again, sort of December, January. It's hard to read too much into those numbers at this point, but certainly the overall trend at the moment is that the banks are being quite active again.
So is this more from a consumer point of view, is it from a company point of view? What are we looking at here?
So this includes everything. So it includes consumers and business. However, I think it's quite telling of where they're at in general. I mean, a lot of, obviously the mortgage space has been quite buoyant with house prices, sort of going through the roof. So on the consumer side, that there's not a whole lot of mortgage defaults that we're seeing. There's, potentially a bit of, your typical sort of credit card debt and things like that. But certainly on the business side, I think it's quite indicative of where we're at and where we're heading.
Yeah, indeed. So we've also got, so you've got the banks, and then one of the other major players, it has been the tax office traditionally over a number of years. What do you think? It's very hard to predict, of course, where things sort of go. I think I made some predictions at this time last year, which were totally wrong, but I won't share those with the audience today. But certainly, let's say that there's no further lockdowns or major restrictions put in place. Where do you see things actually going? Particularly, say, with the ATO.
Yeah, look, good question, and I'll just share one more graph here, which is our this is our graph for the ATO. So you can see that the ATO basically stopped court recoveries earlier than the banks did. So they stopped right at the beginning of 2020, and they're effectively, at zero still now. So they stopped earlier than the banks, and they've restarted later than the banks. Look, it's really hard sort of to tell. We have certainly started seeing and hearing that the ATO is starting to reach out and to engage with businesses, especially in and around lodgements, overdue lodgements, and just starting to get people to actually engage with them. And I would imagine that process will go on for a period of time, and then my view is that they will start pursuing those that either have just refused to engage, or those that have large outstanding debts that don't really have a whole lot of sort of hope of repaying that.
I think for those that join us regularly last year, the ATO were kind enough to to actually present at a couple of the sessions that we had, and certainly I think that the comments that were made were that they wanted to re-engage with as many taxpayers as possible, but potentially those that they don't or unable to re-engage with might be the first cat off the rank. And that certainly leads really into the next question. And one of the things that seems to be, well, it was over the media, last night and probably today as well, was ProBuild and the potential. I'm not sure if it's gone into administration, it may have, but certainly there was talk that that was going to happen, which is a major construction company. It raises the point about with your analysis that you're seeing, what pressure points, what industries do you see as being those that may in fact be starting to suffer?
Yeah, so look, we we publish a weekly insolvency list that sort of looks at what happened in the prior week. What tends to stick out in those lists is there's typically always a large number of construction related businesses that fall under the list, and obviously, as you said, the topical one at the moment is ProBuild. It'll be really interesting to see what fallout results from that in terms of subbies and suppliers that will run into trouble now as a result of not being paid. So we often see when a big player like ProBuild goes down, that there tends to be a lot of dominoes that that fall as well as a result of that. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that plays out over the next few months. But certainly, construction always factors highly on the list. Sort of your usual suspects, hospitality tends to factor highly as well. In the last couple of years, despite the numbers being low, there was, as you'd expect, quite a few tourism-related businesses that came onto the list. And just interestingly, just so far in January and February, there's been a bit more of a sprinkling of sort of a more diverse mix of companies we've noticed where, rather than sort of all being hospitality and construction, there's now, a little sprinkling of, sort of general types of businesses from, financial planners to mum and pup, coffee shop to any matter of things. So again, it'll be interesting to see if that sort of continues or if the numbers do sort of focus on a couple of specific industries.
So what's when you say that there's a weekly report, what does that actually show?
So it just shows basically the companies that have entered into insolvency and who the appointed practitioners are.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so with if you've got with a credit manager, for example, would they use the data that you've got in the reports that you've got in conjunction with, say, also another with other credit reporting? Is that how it normally would work?
Yeah, exactly right. So all of that's exactly right. All of our credit customers use our report and our alerts in conjunction with credit reports.
Yep.
So basically, wherever in their process they run the credit report, they will also run our report to get our data to fill in those gaps. And likewise on the alerts, they'll set up our alerts to fill in the gap there on what they're currently getting.
So then I assume that then they'll be able to ask the question of the customer that they're trying to, or potential customer that they're trying to deal with, about what these particular actions might be.
Exactly right. And look, each of the data points and alerts, really, if nothing else, it provides an opportunity for them to reach out to their customer and have a chat.
Yep.
Provides a touch point. And look, it's not always an issue. Sometimes it could actually be an opportunity where, it could be, hey, do you have a bit of a problem? Is there something we can do to help you? Maybe we can actually help you get out of a pickle.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As I said, we're able to use the report because we're looking retrospectively at the information that's actually in it. We're able to use that to assist us in our investigation side of things, which we found was, I know that there was one of my senior staff members found it invaluable, actually. I thought it was excellent. So if there's any questions now's probably a good time to actually to ask them. But what I might do, Patrick, is if people want to get in contact with you or Alaris and find out a bit more about it, what's the best way of doing that?
Yep. So basically, I'll just quickly put my contact details up on the page. So hopefully you can all see that there. So the best way is flick me an email or just give me a call. Happy to chat at any time. But my email's just patrick@alaris, alaris.com.au. And phone number for those who can't sort of see the screen, 0418 739 921. So happy to chat at any time. Happy to set up sort of a trial for people who are interested, provide some sample reports, and just to see if it can add value to your business.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Chris, we got any questions? No, doesn't sound like it. So, look, thank you all for attending today's session. If there's no questions, we'll bring the webinar to a close. As always, there'll be another Red and the Black in approximately 3 weeks' time, and we'll send you information out about that. But thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. Thanks again, and thanks, Patrick. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Steve.
Cheers.